When tomatoes are in season, it is go time in the kitchen for canning. You want to use them when they're ripe, when they're delicious, because that's the best flavor you're going to get. You do not want those store-bought ones in January. So I am today making, I don't know what to call it. Is it a marinara sauce, spaghetti sauce? Growing up, we always called it spaghetti sauce because that's what it is. I'm not Italian. My family's not Italian, but it's good sauce. Actually, I think it originally comes from like a church cookbook. So this is what all the good locals made. So when I get anything ready for like a sauce or if I'm gonna can tomato juice, this is what I use. It's an attachment for my KitchenAid. It's a juicer attachment, puts it through a strainer, pushes the discards of like the seeds and the peels out the end here. You can buy mechanical ones. You could use a food mill. Whatever you have could work, but if you have a KitchenAid, this is a lifesaver when it comes to tomatoes. So I'm gonna turn it on and get finished up on these. I just cored them and cut them in pieces that would fit down here in the feed tube. But what's nice is it discards any of the stuff you don't want. So it's just a quicker way than doing it by hand. Because if you look into the pot, you can see that it's gonna be quite a few tomatoes. So I have a few left here to do. It's gonna be a total of 16 to 20 quart of this tomato juice. Or like a tomato puree. You could even do this and blend all yours in a blender and then put them in there. So it's just a nice thick tomato juice puree. So I'm gonna finish these up, put the rest of this juice in the kettle, and then get going with the flavors that go in. Okay, so I finished this off, and just so it doesn't get so drippy, you can see I put a big pan, a pan underneath. That just helps so the drips don't get everywhere. So I'm gonna pour the rest of this in. And if you wanna help it not splatter everywhere, if you pour it like onto a spoon, it kind of catches some of those drips and helps them not fly all over your kitchen. I know what you're thinking. Holy Moses, that's a lot of juice. It is. This is a lot. But as you cook it, it condenses and you need to really cook it down to get it thick like a sauce. And so really in the end, it's not gonna be near as much as you think. But I know right now it looks like a lot. I need to move a couple of these things because all of the components, the flavorings that I put in, they're gonna get chopped in a food processor because why chop them by hand if you don't have to? And I don't. So I do the same thing when I do my salsas, as you saw. Anything that takes a lot of chopping or vegetables going forth, I like to do in my food processor. So I've reset so you can see everything here a little bit better. This is everything that's gonna go into here and help flavor it. So to start, you need a lot of onion. And I know, hey, if you make a sauce a certain way, go for it. But this is just a good, I'm gonna call it a good Midwest sauce. And you can use it on a lot of different things. I actually even end up sometimes canning this in smaller jars and we'll use some of it in pizza sauces or anything like that. So it's kind of multifunctional and that's what I love about it. So to cut up my onion in the food processor, I just cut up in big chunks. It makes it easier. And then as I'm going, I'll also chop up some of my herbs with it because herbs or anything really leafy, they chop up easier in a food processor when they have something of substance. So the onion is the substance that's gonna draw the food processor blades to draw all these herb leaves in. So this is my basil. I just went out and picked it. As you know from the other videos I've done, with basil, it is best if you are continually using it if you want it to keep producing. So go out and pick it, use it all the time. If you're not gonna use it, you could freeze it, make it into pesto, freeze that, or you could put it on your compost even. The thing is, you just want to keep using it. So I like to make sure I have a lot of herbal flavors. So that's a lot of my herbs, and you can do them kind of your preference. If you have an herb you don't like, obviously I would say don't put it in. But you can totally just kind of change this around for what maybe you and your family likes. So as you can see, I'm just pulling those leaves off. We can do a few more than in the next batch. So I'm gonna process it just by pulsing it, because that's what helps pull it down in quicker. So just short pulses. The thing is, as this is cooking, most of it is gonna kind of melt into the sauce almost. I just don't want any huge chunks in there. So that's why I'm making sure to get all the big pieces out. So then I'm just gonna put it right in here to my sauce. and I'm gonna continue with the next batch of onions. So in that one I did mostly basil. In this next batch of onions, I'm gonna do a little bit more of the basil, a little bit of sage, and then pull off some of these oregano leaves and do that with it. So let me finish that up, and then you can see where we're going. Don't feel bad going in and checking if you need to push down the sides or if one leaf gets caught. That's fine. Oh, it's beautiful. I think it's affecting my eyes a little bit. These are strong onion, so bear with me. I'm crying because it's just so beautiful, you guys. It's so beautiful. So that was the basil. It had some sage in it, some oregano, more onion. And now I like to add some fennel. I just like the flavor amped up with the fennel. It works into it to a point where you don't even really know the fennel's in there. It's just small bulbs of fennel that I'm gonna chop up. Originally, our recipe growing up always just had all these dried herbs because, okay, guys, growing up in Iowa in the 90s, there were no fresh herbs in the garden. Mom did not grow fresh herbs. I'm trying to think if she grew any, and I really don't think any of them at all, which she says now too is kind of funny, but it wasn't normal. So we did all dried herbs. So we did dried basil, dried rosemary, dried sage, all those things. So I've really changed it obviously somewhat now to include the fresh ones just because I think they're really good. So parsley, also just a whole bunch of that. I went out to the garden and picked all these herbs right before this video, and some of them really were at the end of it. So I think parsley stems sometimes can be a little bit bitter, so I don't like to put those in. I'll just put those in the compost pile. If you want, and your fennel has a lot of the fronds on top, you can put some of those in too. They have good flavor. Otherwise, what I'll do with these, I'll just throw them in a bag in the freezer, and then I'll use them when I'm making stock, chicken stock, or anything like that. I always have a bag going where I put all those extra pieces in. But any of this you can actually put in here, and it adds just a more vegetal flavor, which is good. So I'm gonna process this up. Parsley should not be viewed as just like something you put on a plate. It is actually a delicious, really herby herb. Like it has like that great garden flavor, and I love that. I know this is a full pot. Don't worry. I have a habit of overfilling things. Bowls, pots, whatever they are. I always fill them to the max. That's what I do. Let me wash my hand off. So to finish this up, I don't like to take the time to take off all the leaves of thyme. I know you could do an herb stripper. I don't really do that. I just put in a couple sprigs and then I'll pull those out at the end. Same with rosemary. I just grab a big one, throw it in, and I'll pull that out at the end. And then bay leaves. I'll need to pull those out too. I always keep a couple bay plants in containers and then just bring them into a cold room over the winter. So I'll throw those in there. And then we have a couple odd additions here, and they're kind of amping up the flavors that are in there. So fennel seed, I love the smell. It kind of sounds odd. It's a lot of times in sausages, which makes sense for Italian. And then, really weird, anise seed. Don't mess with the recipe, people. It's anise seed, okay? I know, it's a little weird. You're gonna say, I hate anise. This, honestly, it melts with all these flavors that are in there. And it adds something extra special, and it works together. It's one of those you're gonna have to trust me on. It's different, but it's good. Then we're gonna put in at least 1 tablespoon of salt. Actually, I'm gonna put 2, because guys, this is a lot. Like, look at this, how full it is. So I'm gonna take this over to the stove. I'm gonna stir it together, and I'm gonna let it come to a boil, which is gonna take a little while because this is a lot of tomatoes. I'm gonna bring this up to a boil, stir it together, and then show you the process of cooking it, which is really just a time thing. We're gonna let it sit, work together, get those flavors mixed in, start smelling hopefully a good sauce in a while, but this is gonna be a long process, and I'm gonna say it can be over 2 hours as you're cooking it. So, let this cook, let it come to a boil, then we'll come back and see how good it looks. So this came up to a boil, and obviously since it's pretty full, I adjusted the temperature to make sure it's not gonna boil over, but you can see it's still cooking, the bubbles are still coming up, and this is when it's starting to get that foam on top. This is very normal for tomatoes to do. I do pull some of it off. Some of it I wait till it cooks more, just so I don't pull out too many of the herbs that are in there. But I am gonna pull it off and keep stirring it. But at this point now, I keep it at a nice low boil, high simmer, and let it keep cooking. And I just wanna really start condensing those flavors and reducing the amount, because you want it to be thicker. Right now, it's just like tomato juice and herbs, and that's not a good sauce. So we're gonna let it sit, and we're gonna let it just cook, condense, and then in what could be a few hours, I'm gonna show you what it looks like, and then that's when we're gonna can it. So we're just gonna sit here, take off some of this foam, let it cook, enjoy the smell. It's a good time to clean the house. I might go vacuum. I need to vacuum. This is cooked for about 2 hours. And I know that sounds like a lot of time, but honestly, once it's kind of came to a low boil, I walked away, I did housework, I was cleaning, I was doing other things. I didn't have to babysit it. And that's kind of the big deal here. It sounds like a lot, but it's just sitting there cooking. And you can see that it has really cooked down. We've probably cooked off at least a quarter of that extra water. And that is perfect because you can see those bubbles. You can tell it's thicker, just how they're popping. And when you stir it, you notice it's thicker. So to round it out, to help the viscosity, make it more of a sauce, you could cook it longer. You could do this totally by just keep cooking it till it gets to a condensed version you like. I like to finish it off by adding in some tomato paste. I also think it rounds out the flavor. A lot of old recipes, or just a lot of recipes for sauce in general, are gonna have sugar in them, and upwards of like a cup or more. I don't like to do that. I don't think it needs it, but I do think that tomato paste not only thickens it, but it also rounds out the flavors, because tomato paste is just tomato cooked down to that thick paste, which means this also condenses all the sugars that are naturally in tomatoes, and it makes it sweeter. So I think this is actually just a great way to add some good sweetness, which is what I do if you watch my salsa video. I did the same thing on that. So I'm really just doing it to help it thicken and also round out the flavors. So at this point, I just want to cook it about another 5 minutes. That just helps incorporate the sauce, the paste, make sure it's completely melted into it, and just helps it cook a little bit, that paste, because it's not necessarily cooked at this point, so just helping it kind of get homogeneous with the sauce. So cook it 5 minutes, I'm gonna bring it over, have my jar sterilized and ready, have my hot water going so I can process it, and then we'll be good to go. So I cooked this another 5 minutes, then I pulled it off, stirred it around, and made sure to pull out all the stems of the herbs, the bay leaves. If you remember, I put these in like the thyme like this and the rosemary because it just cooks the leaves off. So why go to the work of stripping them? Why go to extra work if you don't have to? Don't. Now, the longer you cook this, the more condensed it gets. So cook it to whatever consistency you like your sauce. I have even in the past put it in a 200-degree oven for like 6 to 8 hours overnight, and then that cooks it down kind of too. So you can kind of work with it and do what you want. But I always think that tomato paste just really nicely thickens it up. So this is the last one I need to fill. A ladle, having, certain tools are just nice. A big ladle, a big funnel for receiving. That way you kind of keep everything a little bit cleaner. I always think sauce is one of those things I don't get made every year, but every time I do, I'm glad, because it's nice in the middle of winter to be able to pull this out for a quick noodle dish, for different, like any type of thing you want a sauce for. You can even mix it in with other sauces. So I have, I think 7 fit in my canner at once. So now the tops, the rings, you definitely want to wipe them off. Just even though if you were really careful with your funnel, you want to make sure there is nothing on there. And every so often I just fold that over because that one had some. And I dip it again in my hot water. And I just make sure to get all off, because anything like that, like if there is a piece on there, even that you don't see that well, then it would make so the lid doesn't adhere that well and the seal, and that could cause it not to seal. And no one wants to go to this work and then not have one seal. No good, friends. Once all those are done, you can just put your prepared lids on, place them on, and then we're gonna put the rings right on and put them all into our water bath, which is always good to have on the stove and ready to go. It's good to kind of have everything ready as you need it, because once this stuff is hot and ready to go, you wanna be able to process it. My water bath is obviously boiling, which is what you want. So use your jar lifter to get these all in there. It is fitted in the bottom with a ring just to raise everything so the jars do not touch the bottom. You never want them to touch the bottom. And then these process for 40 minutes. Obviously you have to adjust for altitude, check the USDA canning site guide, because that will let you know exactly where you live, what you need to process for. For me, it's 40 minutes. Make sure they're covered by at least an inch of water over the top. A lot of times you can pressure anything that's with tomato too, because that's why it takes so long, because it takes a long time if you're not gonna pressure it. I'm gonna put that back on, let it come to a boil, keep it at a low boil, 40 minutes, pull them out, and we have sauce. It's wonderful. These have processed now, so I'm gonna take them out. I turn the kettle off, and I always put them back onto a rack just because they're really hot and it just helps the airflow movement around them. Catches any drips because obviously they're wet. As you can see, the sauce I had left, I processed into small jam type 1 cup jars or 8-ounce jars. I use that for pizza sauce. So I like to pull it out, use it on homemade pizza, and I just think it's kind of nice. You can do this in whatever size jar you want. You do need to check the canning times. Do you hear that? It's wonderful, guys. It's already canning, it's already sealing. That's the little pings you hear. But whatever jar size you do it in, you just want to check with USDA and see how to adjust the canning times. This is how easy sauce is. Now, obviously, yes, it took a little bit of time in the sense that it cooked for a while, it cooked down, and that's a lot of time, but work? No, it did not take that much work. And now you have either pasta sauce or whatever sauce, maybe you eat a lot of pizza and so you want to use it all for pizza. Whatever it is, you have it for all of it. So it's a really fun way to use your tomatoes. It's a really fun way to use the herbs, and I hope you enjoy it. Adjust the flavors accordingly. If you like this video, make sure to share it around. I love to hear from you guys and see the comments and who you're sharing it with and your friends, because that's the point of the garden. It's all for sharing and helping us bring each other together, right? So get out there, use your tomatoes, make some sauce, do something.